No more fucking around. It's Wild Style Radio. Wild Style Radio. Style Radio.
Stand up and shine.
What is up? What a way to start the show.
We had an opening ceremony.
I know.
We literally had an opening ceremony.
We could open every show with that.
Did you ever dream that, like, the last time we had a show that we would be opening with an Olympic ceremony homage to hard rock and metal?
We've talked about this countless times.
I know.
How metal and rock music is getting the short end of the stick when it comes to big events like the Super Bowl and other things. And no, never would have expected that at the Olympics.
The Olympics, the opening. So how did you come across it? We have not talked about this, by the way. I love this to do this with Kevin. We don't talk about anything until we get here. So how did you, we've texted back and forth. The holy shit, did you see that?
Right.
But how did it like originate for you?
Well, let's first welcome to the Stand Up and Shout Rock Show.
And then we're into it already. We're too excited.
Yep. And we're coming to you live from Salisbury Center Studios on the Wild Style Network, fueled by Monster Energy.
Yeah, there we go.
Out of the way.
We got all that.
So I found out about that performance the morning of the opening ceremony. I saw it on Twitter, X, whatever.
Right.
That I think it was Loudwire put a blast out that Gojira was going to be performing at the Olympics.
Right.
And never did I think it was going to be what it turned out to be.
Right. So I'm in that camp too. So I saw the notices too. I got notifications, news notifications. It was happening. But the stereotype to me is that there's this big mainstream event for the Olympics, and then something like that's cast off to the side. And you might get like 20 seconds of it. Like, oh yeah, we did this too. And this happened over here for like those weirdos and freaks that like that kind of thing.
Right.
It was never going to be a part of the main opening procession.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Similar, I know Ozzy performed at one of the, I think it was NFL kickoff, the first game of the season or whatever, but they didn't even show it on TV.
Right.
He was like part of a halftime show or a pregame show, and he did 3 or 4 songs, but nobody ever saw the footage.
Right.
So I figured this was going to be background music. You might see just maybe 20 seconds.
Right. The clip, the pass away, like, oh, here's French, act Gojira, heavy metal act.
Yep.
And, there's those crazies with the black t-shirts over there, like doing their thing. But back to Olympic coverage.
Right.
No,
and it legitimized rock and metal music, in my opinion.
Awesome. It was wicked.
That could be spotlighted in the way that it did. And for me, when afterwards, because I didn't get to watch it live, I was at work. But then I started seeing the posts on Twitter.
Yeah.
People were posting clips and bits and pieces. So then I was like, well, fuck work.
Right.
I'm going down the rabbit hole. I'm trying to find the video, like the whole thing. And
you couldn't.
And I couldn't.
Yeah.
And by the time I got home, I had literally probably just missed it by like 10 or 15 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so then I waited for the re-air that night, and so then I found it, but it was the French Broadcasting Corporation, so the commentary was all in French, which even though I took 5 years of it in middle school and high school, I didn't know what the fuck they were saying.
I feel like if we talk about this more and we talk about more French names and people, we will literally be saying, pardon my French. I'm going to do my best to wrestle with those names and titles. But,
But what blew me away was on the re-air, so watching it on NBC, and Kelly Clarkson was one of the commentators.
Yeah.
And she was like, this is awesome.
Yeah.
Which I never would have expected that.
No.
And the initial first couple tweets and things that were coming out were like, oh, they're being blasted and it was horrible.
Right.
But I didn't see that in any way. I think everybody was like, it was kind of sort of like when Metallica performed One at the Grammys.
Yep.
And then they finished and
nobody knew what
there
to
was
do
no
with it.
applause. Yeah, there was just 10, 15 seconds of silence while people were like, now what do we do? And it was kind of like that, but I was like, this is awesome. And then everything that came out has just been gushing over it.
Of course.
Sort of sets the bar really high for 4 years from now in LA.
Right. I know. So I was working on stuff at home. So I was working, and I had the Olympic opening ceremony on, and it was on TV, and I was not paying attention whatsoever. I had the sound down, So I didn't really hear the metal come on.
Right.
And you see a parade, the parade of athletes and like all the kind of stuff. And it was just kind of a background visual in my world as I was really like nose deep in a computer. So like that really didn't, grab me. And it was my girlfriend, Ashley, who is a classically trained vocalist of all people, came running in and was like, "Are you watching this?" And I was like, "Watching what?" And then like she hits the volume and cranks up the volume on it. And what grabbed me about that was that it grabbed her, not necessarily, I will say that she likes some metal, but not a lot of metal.
Sure.
But I knew that it was something bigger than at that point, right? Like just kind of immediately that it was in this castle. It wasn't the regular even stage presentation of Gojira being Gojira. And there was the beheaded Marie Antoinette and this whole like homage to the French Revolution that blended the metal with the history, and it did it perfectly. Yeah. And that was amazing. That was just like kudos to the art director. And I guess if there was an Olympic Committee composer, the name that I came up was Victor Le Masne. I guess that's the guy that,
right.
Who was the one, like, I would love to know who greenlighted that whole performance and said, like, I can only imagine what that would be like where, and you and I were talking as we were introing into this show that we read a great Rolling Stone interview that has since been done out there with Joe Duplantier. Thank you. I got the Joe part in that one that he gave with Rolling Stone discussing this because it obviously mushroomed in a lot of ways, not just through social media, but through a lot of press recognition that you brought up when we were introing all of this. And he basically described a team of young people and composers and designers that brainstormed this out. It was a team of people. And I just can't imagine, like, you're bringing up this happening 4 years from now in the United States, a group of musicians, art directors, and designers kind of thinking like, how can we pay homage to this event in U.S. history and marry it to classic music and, of course, have it driven by metal.
Right.
And have that be a part of the main procession. And the geniuses that decided to greenlight that and say, hell yeah, let's do it. I mean, that was to me, I think it's a huge cultural step. It's obviously we're acknowledging the metal and the hard rock, but it's those other pieces too. And it really, that's where I think the word justify, where it justifies the metal, that's how it does it.
Right.
Metal is not just this thing that exists, kind of in this fringe area by itself. It does tie into history and culture and a lot of raw emotion that just people have from day to day. And that was just so badass.
Well, and history tends to be the basis of a lot of the thrash and the metal music to begin with.
Absolutely.
So for that to tie in, and, won't get into the other parts of the opening ceremony that has been discussed, but the entire show was based around French history and culture and different components throughout history. So to mesh that with the French Revolution and the beginning piece, which you can barely see on the clip we were showing, but the Les Mis kind of element to it that then moves into that, and then Gojira just lets loose.
Right.
It's, it totally legitimized it, and it was the right fit for what they were wanting to speak to in terms of the French history.
So I'm going to pass the song title to you. So this was an anthem of the French Revolution.
Asa Ira.
Oh, it's Asa. I was going to say Aka. I was going to go Spanish on that one. So Asa Ira.
Yep.
Okay, so that was an anthem of the French Revolution. My understanding, the literal interpretation is it will go or it will be okay. I love that, basically the band just kind of took that and wrote a lot of original metal behind that anthemic song of the French Revolution. So it was a blend, right? There was the cultural tradition, but then they also made it their own in a great metal song.
Yeah, it was interesting because, in that Rolling Stone article, they asked Joe Duplantier, what sort of guidelines were you put under in terms of crafting this? Mm-hmm. And basically he's like, well, the only thing that we really had to stick to is they wanted us to sing it the title in French. And he's like, and we generally don't do that, even though they are a French band.
Right.
They do all of their performing in English.
Right.
But so he's like, so yeah. And then we just kind of took a bunch of riffs, and he's like, we wanted to metal it out. So, and his brother is the drummer. He's like, so the double bass pedal, and he's like, we just, arranged the music to how we liked it to sound.
Sure.
And then threw the words on top of it.
Right. I love that, basically what he was described as saying, and he did basically a translation of some of the French lyrics. There was some English lyrics in there too, but basically stuck to the theme in writing this. I have the quote, "Let us rejoice because good times will come without fear of fire or flame. It's a message of hope for the world in troubled times with all wars going on and interesting leaders taking over everywhere in the world." It's such a message of positivity.
Yep.
So,
and that's them.
Right.
For being a thrash/death metal band, that most of their music has a very positive tone to it.
Right. And that's, I think, lost. Right. And it's I think very obviously the less melodic you get, the more that type of messaging is lost because people kind of lose that in the style of the music itself and kind of forget, the themes that are driving it. I remember that with Nirvana, like way back. And I remember, friends of ours when Nirvana broke as that punk sound, and it had a heavier edge and a harder edge, not a thrash edge, but that definite punk edge to it. Not understanding their songs until the Unplugged came out. And then the Unplugged came out and everybody loved that CD at the time. And it was like, oh, they're just great songwriters and those are great songs. But those songs were songs. They just weren't electric. They were acoustic. So you removed that, you stripped it down and removed that stylization. And it came to me in that performance that as soon as I saw that, and like you, I saw it on TV and then, did the old DVR rewind, but that wasn't enough. And I was texting you immediately, and we were doing where the hell can we find this on YouTube? And because NBC was NBC, they were locking that down, and they were not allowing any republication. So they were, kind of some fringe recordings that we kept trying to grab, and that's what we posted at first on our social media, on our Stand Up and Shout Rock Show's social media. So we apologize for the quality of that, but then we eventually found better stuff and got it up there.
Yeah, we should post this one, the link to that, which is on YouTube, which is a full 1080, high def version of the performance, but with none of the commentary. So it's all been stripped out.
And you were
pretty cool.
And like you told me this, Kevin, at least I remember this from your text, if I understood it right, you were at this castle.
I have been there. Yes. Yeah. So the castle, which is now has been called for a long time, La Congerie.
That's it.
And it actually was a castle or a palais. It was Palais de la Cité in the 13th and 14th century, where the French kings during the Middle Ages lived. And when the French Revolution started, they took over the castle and turned it into a prison.
Right.
So Marie Antoinette actually was in prison there before she went on trial and was then beheaded.
Right.
So yeah, a number of years ago, I used to work for C-SPAN, and so I went over there. I was over there for almost a month, and we did a bunch of walking tours and vignettes, and so we were actually in there talking about, because what we were there to do was it was a kickoff program for the book Democracy in America by Alexis de Tocqueville. I don't want to get too deep down the C-SPAN rabbit hole, but he wrote that book post French Revolution, which was 20 something years after the American Revolution.
Yep.
And was specific to how democracy was now being formed and developed in France. And he was comparing it to a visit he made to America at the same time after the American Revolution. So, and things he wrote about was that prison. So we actually went there, got a tour of that, did a vignette on torture and prison techniques that they used in that prison.
Isn't that crazy? And then like a lot of horror movies are based off of that. Like I know that was a basis for Saul. They took basically medieval torture techniques, and that's what they used to base the torture in the movie from.
So it was really cool, and it's now a museum, to its history and that period of time. But yeah, it was pretty cool.
And they have a temple not a temple. They have a room dedicated to Marie Antoinette,
which was her cell.
Yeah,
when they had her imprisoned.
Yeah,
but yeah, there's so much history. I mean, it's thousands and thousands of years older than America is. So when I was over there, it was really cool. And I happened to be standing not too far down from there is where they had the guillotine, where they were beheading everybody. And we were kind of doing some B-roll, just outdoor shots, and how they have the historical plaques, but everything is in French.
Right.
And so I'm reading it, and I'm like, I was literally standing on the spot where she got beheaded.
Wow.
And I was like, pretty cool.
You're looking for the guillotine?
Yeah, it wasn't around. But yeah, I mean, that was just it. It was a plaque in the sidewalk, and outside of that, no other mentions to it.
I know that there was a lot of positive response, obviously, from the music community over this performance, and I just, and not only just the metal community and the hard rock community, but kind of abroad across. How do you think that, just kind of pie in the sky? You were bringing up other bands, that they chose Gojira specifically as a French band, but not a big act.
No,
and I think recently here played the Fillmore in Silver Spring.
Yep.
Which is not a large venue around here. What's the capacity of that? 1,500, possibly.
Right.
And who knows? I don't know what their sales were. We were not there for that show, so can't speak but to the audience size. But now, like, if you're a major act, like Metallica especially, or you think of like a thrash metal act that could have absolutely pulled off that style, but has more recognition.
Yep.
It must have been stunning, for them to watch that.
Yeah, and I know Metallica has been very complimentary of Gojira.
Yeah.
Not necessarily.
Oh yeah.
I haven't seen anything specific to this performance, but basically as a newer metal band that is kind of carrying the genre forward.
Right.
They've had a lot of nice things to say about them as performers.
Right.
But yeah, you would have thought. But again, they traditionally try to stick to whichever country is hosting, acts or artists from that country.
Right.
So, the fact that it was, it made total sense that it was Gojira when they announced it.
Right.
So like I said, it should be interesting in 4 years, what they do. I know, going back to 2002, Kiss performed.
Yes.
I think it was the closing ceremonies in Salt Lake City. But, Slayer is from LA.
I'm glad you're bringing that up, because I was thinking about that. We hadn't talked about it. So here's my kind of like dream. If I was maybe on an art direction team, so I like the fact with Gojira that they picked a newer act, as opposed to an aging rock act. And we talk about that. I think when I think of LA specifically, and this is me very selfishly, of course, there's the Sunset Strip. And the Sunset Strip to me is worldwide culturally. And so, like, especially two bands would be Van Halen and Guns N' Roses that have had a global impact on music, and for great reason, because they have great songs and were great bands. But if there was an LA band currently that could pull off doing some Van Halen and some Guns N' Roses, and I think with that look on your face, you know where I'm going. That's a younger act. I mean, not the youngest act that's out there, but a younger act. Dirty Honey.
Yeah, right on.
I mean, Dirty Honey has the talent and the ability, without question, to pull off something like that. And some type of, maybe it's not an homage to the Sunset Strip, but whatever, of the American West, and I think that could be even dialed in. So it's not even a Guns N' Roses or a Van Halen song, but some song associated with the westward movement, in the United States, if that's a part of the history that
California Dreaming.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Dirty Honey is primed to pull a Gojira, looking at their talent, looking where they are, looking at their cultural base, they're ready to go. And they've kind of done it, with some of the hockey stuff. They've been around the sporting environment.
Yeah, they did the Prince tune "Let's Go Crazy" for the Winter Classics. So and obviously segueing into something we'll be talking about a little bit later in the show too.
Yeah,
that sort of goes down that avenue.
Yeah, I also got to give props to Gojira. So with the the mezzo soprano Marina Viotti, and I'm assuming she's Italian and not French, and I apologize to Marina for butchering that name. But so her credentials, when I just kind of looked them up, obviously classically trained with music, with jazz, gospel, and heavy metal.
Interesting.
Right? Like heavy metal's listed as a credential. I didn't know you studied that. Mm-hmm. I didn't know that was a classically trained approach.
They didn't teach that when we were in school.
No, not at all. And I mean, they have these School of Rock, kind of places, but you don't see that in your mainstream cultural, schooling. I love that Gojira, when they were talking about writing this song, they described it as organic, coming up just organic riffs, and they just kind of grooved it out and figured out something. And the classical musicians around them, there was a 300-piece orchestra that you didn't see that was in front of that castle playing with them.
Right.
They clicked in with them. And I will say, I play in cover bands around here, and I have friends who are classically trained, and they scare the shit out of me when they show up, because they know every little mistake and inconsistency that's happening, and they could tear it to shreds, but they're very nice to me. So I appreciate that. But I can only imagine how intimidating that would be, let alone to be strapped on the side of a castle and then have this broadcast to billions, not even millions, around the world. So kudos to the balls on Gojira.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and the point you made, which also he spoke about in the Rolling Stone piece, was, they rehearsed, obviously, but everything was secretive and in private.
Right.
But then they, as everyone could see from the video, they are strapped in, standing on ledges.
Yes. Yeah.
In various points outside the castle. But they never, he talks about they never got to do that.
Right.
So.
Right. And who would?
So you're walking out on a ledge, you're getting harnessed in, and then you're just going.
Right.
And and he was like, he's like, I couldn't see my brother. I couldn't see the bass player.
Right.
He's like, but once we get out there and we know it's showtime, it's go time.
Exactly.
And they just did their thing.
And for me, like in that way, drummer Mario Duplantier, his brother, Joe's brother, so the two brothers that are in the band, I felt so much Dave Grohl out of his performance.
Yeah.
Like going back and watching that even again, like as it was opening up our show, I was like, damn, like that is the Dave Grohl feel to percussion and drumming and hard rock, thrash. And it was excellent. I was, just even could go back and watch those tidbits just of the, the drumming cutaways, because it was just so awesome.
Yep. Great stuff.
Yeah. All right. I think we covered everything. I mean, everything that I can imagine. There's probably a whole lot more that we can get into, because we can turn this, I feel like, into a history show, as you were bringing up, and all these nuances of the French Revolution and where they performed and what they decided to perform, let alone the performance. So,
yeah, well, and obviously we're both big into history, so it was cool all the way around. I was like just floored by the immensity of it and how much airtime they got, and that they were full on featured.
Yep,
as the main thing.
Would you say that was your favorite? And I don't know if you're ready to answer this. It might be a topic for another day, as we do bottoms up or rankings and ratings and would you rathers and the games that we play. Would you say that this was your favorite sport performance? Are you ready to say that now, or are there others that stand out to you, in say the Super Bowl, or by some other type of musical event with a sporting event kind of tied together?
Well, I think the only one that I can really, there's been, obviously, I thought Prince was phenomenal.
I go there right away.
The Super Bowl.
That is my favorite.
Paul McCartney.
Yes.
But, in terms of, rock or bands that we talk about all the time, the only thing that I can even really think of from a sports performance, and I might be missing stuff, but Aerosmith, when they did the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Was probably that was great. But I probably right now I could probably say that is.
It's up there. I can't decide. And I go right to Prince. I'm right with you there.
Right.
Like that's the first thing when I think of Super Bowl performances. I just hope, like you brought up in the beginning in this whole conversation, that people are watching, that there's some art directors watching, the Super Bowl's watching, that the LA Olympic Committee is watching, that This is substantially different and enlightening and refreshing.
Sure.
To, some of these, how many times can we watch somebody lip sync in front of a bank of computers with a fleet of dancers all around them?
Did Aerosmith have his own Super Bowl thing, or wasn't it shared with a bunch of other collab?
I think they started. They played a song or two, and then
Britney was there with. I definitely remember Britney and Steven Tyler together.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. It wasn't their own, but yeah.
Is that like when they? Because I remember that at one point the whole Janet Jackson incident happened.
Yes.
Then MTV got the Super Bowl rights, I guess, pulled away, and then they started doing like a compilation for a little while of multiple artists. Was that around that time?
It was around that time. Okay. Yep.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah. I mean, I think, and we've talked about this specific to the Super Bowls, there are a couple of bands that are overdue to get an opportunity to do something like that.
Absolutely.
And Metallica is at the top of that list.
Absolutely.
They definitely deserve that opportunity. And, considering, what I think James just celebrated his 63rd birthday.
Yes.
And other news that has come out, the time is running out on that.
Right.
And, hopefully this gives a few folks a little push towards,
making it happen.
Yep.
I know. To me, the Super Bowl halftime show in a lot of ways has become a dance act. Yep. And I'm ready for it to be a live event, some type of live event, even if it's not rock and roll, bringing back a live music element, which we go to Prince. Obviously Prince is, a hybrid and a mix of many things.
Sure.
But man, he put on one hell of a halftime show, and it was all live, and it dealt with the elements, that like the torrential downpour in Miami. And he infamously said, "Can you make it rain harder?" When they told him about it.
Yeah, that's
I'm talking about stepping into it. That's what you got to do.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
Can I throw 5 Super Bowl performers to you, and you give me them in the top 5 to 1 order?
Oh, all right.
Sure.
John's throwing a game at us.
This is someone else's top 5
That's
list.
never happened.
Yeah, I figured we'd mix it up. Why not?
Well, Prince is number 1.
Prince's Super Bowl got rained on. Let's see how Lincoln's together. Okay, so the 5 I have for you is 2010 The Who, 2007 Prince, 2009 Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band, 06 Rolling Stones, and U2 in 2002. Or maybe in your top 3. You don't have to do 5. So you got The Who, Prince, Bruce Springsteen, Rolling Stones, and U2.
I got 1 and 5 pretty easy.
Okay.
So it's the things in between. What about you?
Well, I got at least a top 2.
All right.
So, I mean, it's definitely Prince.
Prince is number 1. Like, Prince is number 1, no matter, if you give me the whole list, and that's number 1 by miles.
All of them.
Right, yeah, by miles. Nobody's ready to catch him yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
U2 was great.
And that's where I would go for number 2.
U2 timing-wise was spectacular.
And I kind of forgot about that. That was
it was right after 9/11.
That was a little while ago.
And they put up. I remember they put up that big, that long stretching banner with all the names of everyone who passed at 9/11.
Yep.
And at the very end, he opens up the jacket and has the USA flag in it. I think that the sporting events around 9/11, like Bush throwing out the first Prince, first pitch, New York and Mets, those moments, I just automatically get boosted for the significance of those moments.
What's like the opening ceremony? This is the cultural tie-in. You wrap that in there, magic.
Yeah. Then I'd probably say the Stones.
Yeah,
that's good.
I would agree with that too. Number 5 for me was the Who. And I can't fault the Who for that performance. It's just what you're bringing up, Kevin, about Metallica and when a band was due, because the Who was due well before they had the opportunity to play, and they should have played when they were younger, and that's no fault to them. It was, and God bless them for sticking to live and not going out and lip syncing. But with all that said, it wasn't that I was disappointed by that. I would say I was more saddened by it than anything, because you remember the power of that band, and it just wasn't there because of where they were in their phase of life.
I'd agree.
Yeah.
Yes, I was looking up how long after Prince's Super Bowl performance did he pass, because I was trying to think it was close, and it was about 9 years.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was going to guess about 10 years. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I suppose we can segue into our next piece as we're talking about people's time passing.
I think, Kevin, it was funny because we left the last podcast. We were going to do a bottoms up for Megadeth, and we even announced that on the podcast.
Yep, it's coming.
Yeah, right. And I knew that you'd be excited about that. But then we were not expecting these two huge news events to be thrown at us, amongst other things. I think it was a big, 2 weeks for music. Where between our last conversation and now, so here we are catching up to it in a lot of ways.
Absolutely, and it was certainly, even though I think we did a "What Are the Odds" segment on this, completely floored when the announcement came out last week.
Right,
Aerosmith was stopping the farewell tour.
Yes,
because Steven Tyler just can't perform.
I love that you brought up the "What Are the Odds" segment. I don't remember what odds we picked. Were on that.
I think it was. Would they actually come back and tour? And I think both of us have to go back, but I want to say, I think both of us said it was somewhere in the 10% or less range.
Yeah. I thought we were low.
Yeah.
So,
totally unfortunate. I know I've talked to a ton of friends who had tickets to that show. I know we were talking about potentially trying to score some tickets.
We were trying to go in cheap.
Yeah. Because they were incredibly high.
Yeah, they were.
So absolutely kind of, even though we thought the odds were low, when they did come out and announce they were going to finish the tour, thought that would happen. And the one thing I'll say about it before we kind of get into the meat of what we were going to do with this is I give them kudos because they could have raked the money in.
Yeah.
They could have used backing tracks.
Exactly.
He could have lip synced.
Yep.
But that's not Steven Tyler, and that's not Aerosmith.
Nope.
So, from that standpoint, it sucks, but I give them credit for
chin up, with pride of all of your live performances and not let them, fall by the wayside by watching a lip sync dance act, basically.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I know.
What were your thoughts?
Very unexpected. So, unexpected, but not, as we were saying, like we were dancing with the idea of there. And it wasn't, I think, that when we did our bottoms up, that we were saying that we would never see Aerosmith again because they did their Vegas residency for so long. And I was really kind of expecting them to go back in that environment, which is more restful, right? It's more predictable. It's not the dog days of the road and bouncing from town to town. And it's a hard way to live. And it's fatiguing, even though you're not moving, you're still traveling every day all the time. So that's where I thought that they would land. I thought that when we were doing our bottoms up and talking about our bottoms up, we just wouldn't see the tour really completed, but they were doing well at that residency. And the last time we saw them, Kevin, we saw them together in 2014. I had to look that up. And that was the last time they toured here through DC. And I thought, well, when was that Aerosmith show when Slash opened up for them? Great Aerosmith show. And we took a limo down there for that one, right? We had your son Jake was there for that too.
Well, he was definitely. We took the limo to Kiss that one time.
No,
he was with us.
Motley Crue.
Motley Crue.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Motley Crue.
And I think this was the follow up, right? We had so much fun in the limo for Motley Crue that we decided to do it again for Aerosmith.
Yeah.
But anyway, either way, like that was kind of, and that was my piece with that. I was like, I'm going to see Aerosmith again. I just don't think that I'm going to see him in Washington, D.C. I think I'm going to see him in Las Vegas at some point.
Well, and, maybe some time might heal some of that and maybe they do something like at in Vegas. I'm blanking on the name of the new place, the big dome place that opened.
Oh,
Sphere.
yeah.
Vegas Sphere.
The Sphere.
Yeah.
So, maybe they can at some point and do a residency and wrap things up that way. But yeah, it probably won't happen.
It seems like that they're really truly done. Yeah. And that's the definite sad part to this because you and I over the years have seen Aerosmith a lot. We were blessed that way.
Absolutely. That was one of my favorite bands. The two times we saw them in '87 when we were in high school.
Yeah.
I don't know that anything they've done, any of the shows that we went to after that, matched those two shows.
We were together, Kevin. I reminisce because I remember this is the first time I really saw a rock star fallout happen at a show, and Dokken was opening for Aerosmith on that 87 tour. And we were excited to see Dokken. We were both into Dokken at the time. And especially, I always loved George Lynch. So I was amped to see that. And then we get there, and long story short is that Dokken made it through 3 songs with George Lynch falling on his knees in the second song and then literally passing out face first on stage by the third song that they played. And that was heartbreaking. And then what did Aerosmith do? They didn't even flinch or blink at that. They came out and we saw what, a 3.5 hour show.
Easily. It was, I remember 2.5 to almost 3 hours for sure.
Right.
They came in and they picked it up and, made it. It was going to be great anyway.
Right.
But made it even greater.
Right. And for me personally, the significance of that, my impact on my teenage brain, I had a Dokken shirt because I was a rabid Dokken fan. Even though I loved Aerosmith, I can only afford one. That was the one that I got. So I had it ready to roll. And then I'm like, fuck this shirt. Like, I'm taking it back and getting an Aerosmith shirt. And I exchanged it for an Aerosmith shirt that I still have. So I still have that 87 shirt because I specifically remember it for that because I gave it up. I gave up my Dokken shirt for that one.
Right. Well, and we saw him a couple of times in Roanoke too when we were at Virginia Tech. But, for me, that was great. That one for all those reasons. But the Merriweather show that summer of 87, before we...
I'm glad you're going here.
Summer of 88, before we went down to Tech, was phenomenal for almost the exact same reason. Because I think those that know the history of the band, they went into rehab, they disappeared for a while. They came back out with permanent vacation, kind of rekindled their career. But the deal was there was no alcohol or drugs backstage.
Right.
But yet they took an up and coming young band that most people there didn't know who they were quite yet. Guns N' Roses.
Right.
And Guns N' Roses talked a lot about at that time that they would have to go somewhere else and party and then show up to perform.
Right.
And they were so fucked up that they were late for the show.
Yes.
And they finally showed up. They got to play, I think,
6-7 songs.
Yeah. And then got pushed off stage. And then Aerosmith did the same thing. They came out and they went extra long because they felt their fans were getting gypped a little bit.
Kevin, you and I, that was just, that's on at least in the top 10, if not in the top 5 shows. Cause I get asked that, like, what's your favorite show you've ever seen, kind of stuff. And that's really hard because it's like coming up with songs. Cause you listen to so many songs. We've seen a lot of shows. We're blessed that way.
Sure.
But that is way up there. And I will say specifically, I know that you and I had a hell of a good time at that show.
As we generally do.
We turned it up in the right way without turning it up a little too loudly. You know what I mean? And getting into trouble for that. We definitely caroused and, were a part of the crowd and the scene. And that was just like a damn great night in life.
It was awesome. So that if I had to rank them all, some I probably can't even remember.
Right.
But that was the top time seeing them.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, I always appreciated Aerosmith like along those lines for coming up with really strong opening acts. They were not afraid to take on a really strong opener like Guns N' Roses upcoming at the time. The first time I saw the Black Crowes were with Aerosmith as an opening act. I remember seeing Four Non-Blondes of all people. You remember that song, What's Up? That big grunge hit. They opened for Aerosmith. So it was a really diverse approach towards openers, and they were very accepting of all types of new acts coming at them.
Right.
So you always had a great opener with them.
Yeah, and so John has it pulled up here, but or queued up is the statement that they released, and I can't necessarily read it, but the third paragraph I think really kind of says it all. Is we always wanted to blow your mind when performing. As you know, Steven's voice
is an instrument like no other.
Yep.
He spent months tirelessly working on getting his voice to where it was before his injury. We've seen him struggling.
Now I can read it.
I know. And that threw me off. John just blew up the text, and then I lost my train where I was reading. We've seen him struggling despite having the best medical team by his side. Sadly, it is clear that a full recovery from his vocal injury is not possible. We have made a heartbreaking and difficult but necessary decision as a band of brothers to retire from the touring stage.
Yep.
Yeah.
So,
It's like the Bon Jovi documentary, which we talked about.
Absolutely. And it sounds like, they've got this 40th anniversary for Slippery When Wet that's coming up next year.
Right.
And the rumor is they're going to try and tour.
Right.
But from watching that documentary,
right,
you wonder if he's even going to be able to do that.
John's in bad shape for sure.
Yeah. Had that throat operation. And sounds like it kind of helped, but it's different. It's like you said, it's a grind to go out and do. So maybe they do something in kind of a limited capacity, but maybe they don't.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Disappointing, but we hope to lift the spirits of those. We've got some friends that are huge Aerosmith fans like us.
Yep.
And we've got some that aren't big fans of Aerosmith, which we can't quite understand or come to grips with.
Right, yes. I'm going to call out Daniel Ruin probably multiple times through this because our friend of the show, Daniel Ruin, of the Age of Ruin, a regular here at the Salisbury Center, does not like Aerosmith. Yeah, and so we have gone back and forth, Daniel and I, about all the reasons why he should like Aerosmith, and he adamantly argues against liking Aerosmith. So I don't know how he's taking this news. And, when I texted you, Kevin, that's why I went, I didn't know how you felt about it, because we were talking bottoms up. We were talking bottoms up with Aerosmith. We were talking albums, but I felt like in this day and age, so many people like songs for their playlists.
Sure.
So I feel like that's what happens. The terrible effect of bands who stop touring is they, in some ways, can get to be forgotten. I feel like a big victim of that in a lot of ways is a band like REM,
right?
Which was a hugely impactful band.
Yeah, in their prime, when they called it quits.
Right, and then they did, and you just don't see as much as you should about REM because they had a significant impact on alternative rock in the 90s, even going into the 80s. And I don't want that to happen to Aerosmith. So that's why I was thinking, in this day and age, it's all about playlists and not about albums. But we can talk about albums, of course, along the way. And that's why we came up with some recommendations to keep Aerosmith alive in your hearts and in your ears. And these are recommendations that Kevin and I came up with. And again, we don't know what we've come up with between one another for some Aerosmith for your rock playlist.
Yep. And I'll just say right out of the gate, obviously, everybody knows some songs. Mm-hmm. And from my perspective, when I did this, I'm not looking to hit the biggest of the hits.
Yep, I gotcha.
So I think I went with, and I imagine we're going to cross over at least a couple of times.
Always. That's always fun when that happens.
Yep. But I tried to take deep cuts.
Okay.
That maybe people don't know as well.
Right.
But really kind of give the essence of what Aerosmith was all about.
I love it. I get it. So,
and
I get it.
There's nothing that is in my recommendations that is going to be more recent than 1987.
Okay. Wow. All right. So I was thinking along those lines as well, and I'll give a Nikki Sixx quote that I pulled. Their entire catalog is outstanding, but those first 5 albums were the holy grail for a young future Nikki Sixx. So there's a lot of artists that obviously had a lot of great quotes about the impact of Aerosmith for them, and Motley Crue and Nikki Sixx, very heavily influenced by Aerosmith and quote them quite a bit in their lyrics. There's a lot of allusions to Aerosmith songs and a lot of Motley Crue's lyrics. So I didn't go with the first 5. That was kind of my approach. I'm glad you brought it up because I was wondering how you were thinking about this and did this because again we didn't talk about it. I went up to 1989. I didn't go to 87, but I went to 89, and I didn't go beyond that. And it's not that I think that those albums are bad, but with 10 songs, we decided to pick 10 songs apiece for your playlist. That really limited it, and I wanted to do justice probably to their the heart of their best musical work.
Sure.
And I feel like I danced between deep tracks and hits, but I never picked a great, I would say top 10 hit from them in my list.
Okay.
So I danced back and forth between that because some of those hits are very strong songs.
Yeah. And I think, a lot of the newer stuff you hear a lot still on the radio or if you go to a Spotify Aerosmith channel, those are the things that you tend to hear along with the biggest classics.
Do you get that on your Peloton rides? You get some Aerosmith there?
Yes, they've done an artist series on Aerosmith.
Cool.
And yeah, it's all the usual suspects. You would think.
Nice.
And yeah.
And
particularly the one from the Meteor movie, Ben Affleck.
Oh yes, I don't want to close my eyes, or don't want to miss a thing.
That's not on this list.
Obviously, it's not on our list because we don't even know the exact title. Yeah. That was their only number one.
It was.
Yeah. Yep. All right. You want me to kick off? You want to kick off?
I'll go first.
I see. I went to the digital art department.
I see that.
I did not go to the old classic art department. That's collecting dust.
We're stepping into the 20th century now.
So, John, you got that to deal with. You got both of us that have, visited the digital art department. All right.
John's okay with my first one off of Permanent Vacation.
That's a good song, man.
Hangman Jury.
Right. I love it.
It's those that don't remember back to when there were cassettes, or I guess albums are now back in vogue, but this was the first, if I recall correctly, this was song 1 on side 2.
You're correct.
And absolutely my favorite tune off of that album.
It's a great bluesy song.
Yep, very bluesy.
Harmonica work from Steven Tyler on that song.
And then it just kicks in and rocking.
Love it, man. I love it. I'm gonna fall in line with the same album, and I'm wondering because I'm gonna say this about this when I reveal mine. I went with Ragdoll, also from the same album, Permanent Vacation. It's a good tune. I will say, this is the biggest single, the biggest charting single that I've selected. So we're talking about in terms of hits. This is the biggest hit. I like the swing of this song and the beat of this song. It hit Billboard at 17. I have that noted. So it was a top 20 hit. Again, the highest chart. So we didn't go to number 1 with Don't Miss a Thing or whatever that would be. So for me, it's interesting that you picked Permanent Vacation. And I wonder if this is a pick of our age. Because this is the album where I fell in love with Aerosmith, was Permanent Vacation.
Yeah.
I feel like I had Done with Mirrors and I bought Done with Mirrors and I liked it. But this is when I really, really just throttled into Aerosmith, and I think that was probably the first tour that we saw. Was the Permanent Vacation tour.
So I would say, like we talked about, we did this when we did the Metallica Bottoms Up, and then we did it with Gavin Evick, and we did it with Age of Ruin, and some of the other bands that have come in that we've chatted with,
right?
And depending on what we were calling your entry drug,
right? Exactly.
Generally tended to be, particularly with a band like Metallica that is, has a wide-ranging catalog and been around for a number of years. This Permanent Vacation was our entry drug for the most part.
And that's why I felt comfortable just even starting this list with something off of Permanent Vacation. I was like, that's where I found Aerosmith.
Right.
And you probably getting to our friend Daniel Ruin, because I'm going to pick on him a bunch. He's a little younger than us. So his entry drug was Amazing and Crying and those Aerosmith power ballads that were really kind of blatant attempts at cracking charts, which doesn't have the power of some of the songs that we're bringing up.
Yeah, back in the tailing days of when MTV showed actual music videos.
Exactly. A lot of Alicia Silverstone, happening in those videos.
And Steven's daughter.
Yes, Liv and Alicia were in those times.
Yep. So I did say no hits, but there's only one.
Look at you.
One classic tune that I just couldn't leave off the list, and it's off of Toys in the Attic.
Yep.
Sweet Emotion.
That's a slick song, but I don't know. Was that? Oh, I guess it did go on Billboard. I have notes on that one.
Okay.
So yes, it hit 36.
Okay.
Yeah. So not as high as Ragdoll even.
Right.
But probably more known and better known.
Yeah. Well, certainly one of their greatest hits.
Right.
But I just love that song from beginning to end. Mm-hmm. It's covers all of what kind of Aerosmith is about to me.
Right.
And
speaking of greatest hits, it was on the Red and White. There's a lot of Aerosmith greatest hits albums. There's big ones.
Their first greatest hits.
Exactly. That was a bit of a gateway drug too, right? I felt like it was Permanent Vacation, greatest hits, Done with Mirrors, around that time. Yeah. All right. So I went with Done with Mirrors. Let the Music Do the Talking, which was originally a Joe Perry song. So when, Aerosmith had its trials and tribulations, for sure, they had a lot of drama. Sorry about the graphic covering up the title of the album there, Done with Mirrors. But you can see that on the album cover. Got to talk to the digital art department about that mix up. Oh, look, is that your next one?
No, it wasn't my next one, but it's also one of them.
All right. Yeah. But I mean, so evidently, like, it's always hard to know with Aerosmith if they're trying to one up each other, if they're trying to snub each other, if they're trying to help each other. It seems like it's a mix of all of those things. And I think this is one of those songs because evidently Steven Tyler heard that when Joe Perry did this on an album as a side project and liked it, but then felt he could improve it.
Sure.
And it sounds very different than the Joe Perry version. And I like this version better. So I don't want to sit here and say Steven Tyler was right, but I love this song.
And the video is phenomenal.
Right.
So if you haven't seen the video,
great live video,
it's a live video. I think it's got a lot of, the bootleg portion.
Yes.
I think they physically handed out cameras to fans and
before Bon Jovi did it.
Right.
Aerosmith did it.
Yep.
And I heard that they did that illegally. That I don't think that they were allowed to tape in that venue when that went down and that was the rumor. I don't know. I feel like I heard that somewhere.
Right.
Yeah. But I don't know if that's true or not.
So if you haven't seen it, you can go back to YouTube and you can certainly find it, but it's a great, Aerosmith kind of hit their prime with this album, Permanent Vacation, and the others where they were doing a lot of videos, but
yeah,
this is a good classic one.
Great workout song. You know what I mean? Yep. It's got a good tempo, upbeat. Steven Tyler has just got bitchin' vocals on that one. I specifically have the next one for Daniel Ruin. I'm just going to keep calling him out again and again. Because the non-Aerosmith fan, I got a ballad. And this ballad is Seasons of Wither off of Get Your Wings from March 1974. Was not released as a single, but it somehow came around with a lot of additional fanfare, and I feel like it's a cult hit. And I had to go with a ballad just to prove a point. Aerosmith's known for their power ballads, but this is not their typical power ballad like you would get with an Amazing or a Crying. Right. And evidently it was written when Steven Tyler was holed up in his house in Massachusetts in the winter. So he was, I guess, holed away and missing being in the world. And this has that starving, desolate effect, maybe like a Game of Thrones kind of feel to it. So yeah, so there's that. If you want to listen to an Aerosmith ballad, go for this ballad. It's much more rich than
great one.
Yeah.
And my next one is actually off that same album, and it's their one cover.
I know, right? I know
that.
Yeah,
I would go to.
Yes,
as a cover tune. So Train Kept a Rolling.
Right.
It's great live.
Yep.
Yardbirds tune. I think a lot of folks don't really know that.
Yes.
But
But like Seasons of Wither, it's built up a cult following. Like not released as a single, didn't chart, but certainly played at shit tons of shows. I mean, how many times have we seen that live?
Yeah. Oh no, it's a great live tune, and clearly they love to play it.
Right.
And but I think the average run of the mill fan would think that's their song. They wrote that.
Right. Right.
But it's a cover.
All right. Excellent. I'm going back to Aerosmith's very first album with just another bitchin' party tune, Mama Kin, all the way back from 1973. So I read this. Oh, you got that there too?
Second favorite Aerosmith tune.
Really? Okay, yeah. You got that number 2. Look at you. So first of all, I feel like I first heard this song, I have to confess, not from Aerosmith.
Right.
Same place?
Yeah, it might have been about the same time-ish because the Gems album came out.
Exactly.
And it was on that.
Yes.
Which was kind of
That's a
greatest
question.
hits of not greatest
Deep
hits.
tracks. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I do think that was kind of about the time that
Guns N'
Roses.
Yep. Off of their EP Lies,
right,
which was really out before Appetite for Destruction. If you had the true EP of GNR Lies,
demo,
right? They re-released it after the success of Appetite for Destruction, but it was on the demo.
But yeah,
Buck Cherry covered it too in 2014's "Fuck." That was their actual album name, was "Fuck," but it was a great cover of it. A lot of bands love this song, but the little factoid that I dug out about this was written, and Seasons of Wither was also written on a guitar that Steven Tyler found in the trash in Boston. And it had no strings. It was gutted and beat up. He was able to put 4 strings on it. And maybe that's why it gets a dirtier sound to it. And maybe Seasons of Wither has a dirtier sound. I have this quote too. Somebody asked Steven Tyler, "What's mamakin?" He says it's the mother of everything. It's the desire to write music, the desire to get laid, the desire to go through a relationship with a girl or whatever it is. Keeping in touch with your mamakin means keeping in touch with the old spirits that got you there to begin with. Great, great party tune. And GNR knew it, and they knew it early. So good for them.
All right.
All right. So before you skip, I'm going to just jump right up because I have this with you too, Kevin. I got Sweet Emotion also off of Toys in the Attic. So yeah, we mentioned. So I'll also say this. That I love the tie-in with Sweet Emotion specifically with my favorite movie of all time, Dazed and Confused. And when I saw that in the movie theater in 1993, I vividly remember that opening scene, and you hear the bass line, that badass Brad Whitford bass line coming in, and the orange GTO in slow-mo passing through a parking lot. And I was like, I'm going to love this movie. And brilliance to like Rich Linklater for coming up with a Sweet Emotion intro that was just badass. And it also, it met the song, not only met the movie. So I'm in lockstep with you on Sweet Emotion, nice. Kevin.
My next one is also off of Toys in the Attic.
You went comedic Aerosmith.
This is another great tune. I think the first time I heard this was when they performed it at that show at Capitol Center.
Yeah.
So I'm like, this song is awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's very, very tongue in cheek, can be interpreted a number of different ways, but yeah.
And I'm trying to think like the instrumentation for it. It's not going to give you distorted guitars like this song.
No.
If you've not heard Big 10-inch Record, it's a big band song. It's got a big band sound to it.
It does.
Which makes it super fun.
Right.
I think like Aerosmith are probably the kings of the double entendre, which, a Big 10-inch Record, it's not too subtle, but it's still a song about a Big 10-inch Record.
That's right. And they were able to beat you over the head with it sometimes with their double entendre.
All right. So this is my newest entry into this. I love this song off of Pump, and I do love the album Pump. So like I couldn't ignore that album. I even like the power ballads on that album. So if Daniel Ruin, the power ballads are still good here, but this is not a power ballad. This is the song F-I-N-E Fine, and they even chants that in the chorus as F-I-N-E Fine.
Mr. Ruin's refusing to come on air to talk about Aerosmith.
John is trying to get in touch with Daniel Ruin so I can
soft.
Fuck that band.
Wow.
So
wow.
Maybe.
That's very angry.
I should have started off that we were trying to talk about some Age of Ruin show.
Exactly.
Got him on.
And then, hey, tell him that. Text him that. Say, hey, never mind. We're going to talk about Age of Ruin instead.
I'll see what we can do.
Let's see if he bites on that. But FINE is actually an acronym. I guess, Steven Tyler, with a lot of substance issues that he's had through life, fucked up, insecure, neurotic, and emotional is evidently the acronym. But the song's not that. Like, this is a party song. This is a song about being hungry. And I love that about it. Like, I heard this when I was 18, 19 years old, and you're hungry for love at 18, 19 years old. And there's no better song that describes how hungry you are for some of that good loving than F-I-N-E Fine in a super fun kind of way. So like all that double entendre you brought up in Big 10-inch Record, it is definitely throughout every lyric in this song. And it's just a great bitchin', upbeat, fun, I got to get some good loving kind of song.
Next up for me, off the Rocks album, Nobody's Fault.
Oh, I knew, I had a feeling you were going to go there.
And I don't know that I actually knew this song all that well until Testament had it on the New Order album.
Yep.
And I'm like, that's an Aerosmith tune?
Yep.
But killer tune.
Absolutely. And I'm with you there too. And you and I are both like wicked hard Testament fans, and they just did a great job covering this song.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, they really did it justice. And a lot of times, a band might miss that. They might miss the spirit of the song, but Testament nailed it.
Yep.
Yeah. So both versions, the Aerosmith version and the Testament version, strong song. I'm also off the Rocks album here, Kevin. I went with a little Back in the Saddle.
Nice.
I know. It's just a fun, upbeat song. Evidently, Joe Perry wrote this. My factoid on this one he wrote this on a 6-string bass while on heroin. So it's got a giddy up, kind of feel to it. Sebastian Bach, there's a cover of this from Sebastian Bach on his solo album Angel Down. And there is a Kiss compilation that a lot of artists participated in, not the same old song and dance. And those from Quiet Riot and Mark Slaughter also did a cover of Back in the Saddle. But I really like it if you need a comeback in life somehow, some way, and you're coming back off of a hardship. This is a song that's gritty, that makes you feel like you're coming back in a big and bad way. And I like how it moves you in that direction. So if you want to feel some passion, regarding that kind of emotion and feel, go for some Back in the Saddle.
That's a popular song on Peloton.
Oh, is it? Let's see, there you go.
It's almost on every single one.
Man, the art department's
all right.
a mess.
So my next one, again, off the Rocks album, which is just a great album.
It is.
And it's Last Child.
There we go. And then it's another great cover version of that one.
There is.
Uh-huh.
And I wanted to bring that up as part of this. And I'm actually going to put the glasses on.
Oh, I love it.
Because I shared this with you and our friend Eric Magruder.
Uh-huh.
This was a perfect tribute, and it's coming from the band that covered this tune and that just does an amazing version of this, Dirty Honey.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about quite a lot, but Mark LaBelle, lead vocalist with Dirty Honey, on the day that it was announced that they were retiring, he says, "It's a sad day for rock and roll when the greatest American rock band hangs it up. I was just a little kid when I met Steven Tyler and Joe Perry outside of Pix 106 in New York before my first ever live concert experience at SPAC in Saratoga, New York. It was a day that would forever change my life. Growing up, all of my friends were going to see Dave Matthews or whatever pop act that was famous at the time, while I was taking family trips to Albany, Philly, or Boston to see the Stones, AC/DC, Tom Petty, and the Heartbreakers, but it all started with Aerosmith.
Yeah.
I think my family has great taste."
Yeah.
And he goes on and on and on, but you see Aerosmith in Dirty Honey.
Absolutely.
And
I was
the
thinking the same thing.
influence that they've had on that, how Dirty Honey has recorded their music.
Yep.
It's, they are Aerosmith 2.0 to a certain extent, in my opinion.
Oh, absolutely.
And
we had that conversation with classic rock, like what we describe classic rock, not necessarily as a time period, but as a sound and a style. Right. And that's Dirty Honey sound. That's why we like them so much. It's a classic sound.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's no doubt. You hit that nail on the head. It is strongly influenced by Aerosmith.
And Mark has said that in multiple interviews, but I thought that was a very nice compliment to them on the day they made that news announcement.
Yep. All right, my second song off of Get Your Wings. So I go back and I've double dipped into only 2 albums, and Get Your Wings is one of them. So I love it as an album, and that is Woman of the World. And this is probably my deepest track. And this is just an homage to a girl that's got you, and there's nothing you can do about it. And God, she knows it. She's a woman in the world, and God, she knows it. And that's just like, he did a great job expressing those emotions in a very fun way in that song and that great album. I'm going to go again?
No.
All right.
I'm ready.
All right.
So my next one, going back to the first album, last song on Aerosmith, Walking the Dog.
Yeah.
Just dirty, rocker.
Yes.
Great tune.
Yep. And we're talking, so many of these, as like it's just hitting me more and more as you're bringing up your picks. I'm bringing up mine. That was a cover with Rat.
Yep.
Yeah, on their EP, going back to their first EP before Out of the Cellar came out.
Yeah, there's been some bands that have done great covers of Aerosmith tunes.
Absolutely. All right, I got one pick off of Draw the Line, which is the title track, Draw the Line, just because of the drama that's in that song. That I love the slowdowns and build-ups almost before you had that in grunge music.
Right.
You have that here with Draw the Line, and Steven Tyler screams in the middle as the song builds back up. Just put goosebumps on me still to this day every time I hear me some Draw the Line.
I like doing these things. and including the album covers because I think that's just a phenomenal album cover.
Yeah, with the
and you don't necessarily get that as much anymore these days, but the characters of all the band members.
And they really like emphasize the hair. You know, they went for the hair in this one.
Hair and the lips.
Exactly, right. Let you know what Aerosmith was all about. Did we get one? You got one left, or did I?
I think I have only one left.
Okay, good. I thought I might have jumped over you, and I didn't mean to do that.
Oh, no.
All right.
So this is my absolute favorite Aerosmith tune, and it's Chip Away the Stone.
Yeah, cool. And that is on that Deep Track Greatest Hits compilation, and it was written for this, right?
No, it was actually, so I have notes on that.
Okay.
It was actually recorded as a B-side on for the first album.
Dude, that's a great tune.
And actually for a live album. So it was I hate that I have to go to the glasses. It's a B-side. It was released in 1978 for the live bootleg album. But then they re-recorded it, you know, because it was a live version that went on as the B-side. But then they recorded it in the studio and released it on Gems. So I think that's the first time the song was actually released.
I like it when you go to the glasses because I know the shit's serious. I know it's getting fucking real when Kevin goes to the glasses. That's what I love about that. All right, so my finale is Licking a Promise off of Rocks.
Nice.
I had to end with Rocks. This is another bitchin' party tunes. Obviously, I went down the party tune roads here for Aerosmith, written about the band's determination to deliver a rocking live show. I did end on Rocks intentionally just to give some love to Rocks because I got some factoids about Rocks. And we're talking about the influence of Aerosmith. Rocks was one of Kurt Cobain's favorite albums. He listed that in his top 10 albums of all time. It ranked 176 on Rolling Stone's magazine's list of 500 greatest albums of all time until, through 2012. That list was revised in 2020. It dropped from 176 to 366. Oh. I know. And I guess just change of the times, right? And I remember there was a lot of controversy over that new list when it came out in 2020. I would disagree with that big of a drop for that album. Yeah. Talked about Nikki Sixx. James Hetfield from Metallica identified Rocks as well as Aerosmith as his most important music or influence in music, stating the band was the reason why he wanted to learn guitar. And I love this quote from Slash. If you can read a lot of quotes from Slash about the album Rocks because he's completely in love with that album. I would say it's probably his favorite album of all time. But this is his quote. I was in 7th grade and just going through the whole 1978 music thing that was happening for kids, which was like Cheap Trick and the Cars. Anyway, there was this chick I was going after that was considerably older than me. I was trying to be cool enough to take her out and have my way with her. Finally, I sort of weaseled my way into her apartment. So we're hanging out and she puts on Rocks by Aerosmith and I was mesmerized by it. It was the be all end all best attitude fucking hard rock record. I'd grown up with music, but this was like my record. I must have listened to it a half a dozen times. I completely ignored her. I got on my bike and rode away. I was totally in there. I was at least going to get a decent French kiss, and I completely dropped the ball for Aerosmith, and that was that. It was probably one of the records that sums up my taste in hard rock bands to this day. Meanwhile, she's out there somewhere, and I missed it, but it was worth it. So there you go. That was a different type of love there for Slash.
Definitely.
For the album of Rocks. So, kind of like getting back into some summation, like of Aerosmith. I've always thought this about Aerosmith, and this might be another conversation for another day because we're certainly running out of time. But you think of a lot of, legacy and lifelong and lasting hard rock acts, and it's easy to me to go to English acts, right? Queen, Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath,
right.
As examples. And there's not as many American versions of those if you kind of look at the broad legacy of the music that they produced. And I can think of a couple, but do you think that Aerosmith is probably the largest? You can consider them on the list, but are they the largest legacy hard rock act that the U.S. has ever put out there?
I would say absolutely, because I was thinking about this same thing myself, right? Because they were coming out in a time where the arena rock bands, most of the ones that were the most famous. Who, Stones,
Led
Queen.
Zeppelin.
Everyone was
The Beatles.
from England.
Right.
So, Aerosmith, I think, was the first American band to hit like that.
Right.
Boston was out around the same time. They're huge.
Right.
But I think when you really get down to it, Kiss.
I could put Metallica there.
Absolutely.
In terms of having impact and influence on musicians past them, and then also be well known,
right?
Throughout our culture.
Yeah, I mean, but certainly, in the 70s, early 80s, Aerosmith is the band in the U.S.
Yeah, it goes that between Metallica and Aerosmith for me in terms of having that legacy impact on the hard rock and heavy metal music scene.
Absolutely.
And that's why I think that this conversation that we're having right now is so big that we just don't get the ability to see them live anymore, which is, I think, an overriding theme of our show.
Right.
Go see as much live music as you can.
Especially some of these bands that, have been around for a while, because you don't know, it's, they're getting up there. Yep. So you don't know that you're going to have that opportunity again. And since we are getting close to having to wrap it up, the Notebook Wagering guys are going to be in here soon. Yes. So again, check out the other shows on the Wylde Style Network platform. But
and live shop standupandshoutrockshow.com. Yep. Yes.
Get some swag. We've got
notebookwagering.com.
We've got our t-shirts with this logo on it. So
if you want a nice shirt with the collar, though, you got to shop notebookwagering.com.
That's true.
Yeah,
they're a little more classy.
They are dressed way better, than us. But I mean, it's kind of a rock and roll thing, right?
And then A Tribe Called Jess is on after Notebook Wagering. But yeah, get out and see your live music. We've got some shows coming up here at the Salisbury Center next Saturday, August the 17th, Localpalooza 3. Featuring Black Flag as the headliners, Age of Ruin. Maybe they'll do an Aerosmith cover.
I love it.
Knuckleheads, Cursor, Ben Demise.
Daniel Ruin, I want to do a Aerosmith cover with you. I do.
And some other band, Days of Five.
Yes.
So come on out.
Days of Five, 6:30.
Localpalooza number 3. Get your tickets. Get out here. And then a couple other local live shows tomorrow. Gavin Evick Band is having their first headlining set at the Tally Ho.
Yeah.
And our friends in Shock Mafia.
Excited for those kids, Gavin.
Excited for those kids, yes.
And then, of course, our old friends, our old and dear friends from Shock Mafia out at the Jam and Java.
Making their reemergence to the live music scene at Jam and Java. So
when I say old and dear friends, they're not old. It's just our friendship is old. I'll put it that way.
You said it. I didn't.
I said they're not old.
So I think that's wrapping us up, eh?
All right, let's go make some sports bets.
This is WSIC.